Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundless success to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And you're a very well-read guy. I'm sure you, when you were in high school, you probably read the book Tale of Two Cities. Well, we have the modern-day equivalency of that, and that is Trump's Middle East trip compared to Uncle Joe's. We'll let you run with it, Doctor. Starting with the purple carpet.
Well, okay, starting with the purple carpet, it's quite frankly a show of how the world actually views Trump versus Biden. This was respect and honor that they were showing Trump, and he's gotten this kind of respect at every stop. Biden never got that kind of respect. And I said to someone earlier in the trip when he just went off, you know, all Trump had to do to make this trip successful was not have a foreign leader herd him around.
Yeah.
And he blew it out of the water.
Oh,
billions of dollars in investment from Saudi Arabia, billions more from Qatar. There is the strong possibility that the deal he signed with Qatar this morning could create up to 2 million U.S. jobs.
Okay, let me ask you a question, Dr. Lopkin, because this is it. Quote the Michael Jackson's last tour that never happened. You're Bob and Nancy in Indianapolis. I mean, it is a real question. It's not rhetorical. How does that not register when you see the motorcade being followed or being sandwiched by Arabian Chargers? I mean, the purple carpet, which is the ultimate sign of respect in that country, relates to the purple blossoms in the desert. How does you talk about these, we'll talk about approval numbers and all that stuff. How does the average American, doesn't it register eventually that Biden was a failure and so are the Democrats? How can it not? That's partisan, but I don't think it's a partisan question.
Actually, I don't know that the symbolism is going to have as much impact on people who don't follow politics closely as you might think. What'll have the impact is the announcements of all of the deals, the announcements of the jobs that are going to come, the influx of money that's coming into the country as opposed to going out of the country for a change. That's where the impact is going to be.
I agree with you, but I think it's an 80-20. I think if you had no deals and all the pageantry, agreed with Dr. Lopkin, just a nothing sandwich, a nothing burger, to quote Hillary. But juxtapose all these deals to the pageantry, it does send a real signal that you have a powerful leader. I really do believe that.
Yeah,
one without the other means nothing. Or I should say, the pageantry without the other means nothing.
Right.
But
it's the result that hammers it home. Yeah, it's the result that hammers it home. But the difference is very stark between the Trump administration and the Biden administration. The Trump administration is essentially using Trump's business contacts to now create deals that benefit America. Biden used America's contacts and his position as a politician to benefit the Biden family. It's exactly the opposite.
100% great analysis. That's why you're the doctor. But I want to well done. I want to put something else on the table. What if in the next month or two, Saudi Arabia and others sign on to the Abraham Accord? I mean, why do I ask that? Because, the Democrats, like, money could fall from heaven and they say there's a problem, it's pollution. I mean, what do you say? I mean, go ahead, but let's just say if that happens, what impact?
It's going to, unfortunately, it's going to depend on what echo chamber you're listening to. Because if you remember, during Trump's first administration, we had four Arab countries join the Abraham Accords. And the Democrats essentially said, oh, the accords mean nothing. They signed a piece of paper that doesn't mean anything. And I spoke to people even during the Biden administration that honestly believed that the Abraham Accords were garbage, that it was a show about things that had already been decided. So it's going to depend on what echo. If you're listening to MSNBC, you're not going to believe it happened. If you're watching CNN, you'll go, oh, okay, that's interesting. If you're watching or listening to podcasts like ours or anybody that actually covers the news with analysis, you're going to realize that this is a game changer for the Middle East.
Okay, you mentioned something that's extremely important. That's Carnivore Radio. No, I'm kidding. It's podcast. See, here's where I think that some of the calculus has to be changed. And that is in 2016, 2018, corporate media was still the king of the jungle. That is not true anymore. I think information disseminates, especially with younger people. That's why Democrats are bleeding youth. The only thing they have is reenactments of Woodstock. I think people don't get as much news. So I think things like the Abraham Accord, other trade deals, I think the ability and the effectiveness of corporate media to block stuff is dissipating very quickly. If not,
it is dissipating, but only because Trump is in office. If you looked at the Biden administration, they only did interviews with friendly media, and I'm not talking about Joe Biden himself. I'm talking about his cabinet, his appointees. You almost never saw them on Fox. They didn't do podcasts. Everything was focused through the three old school networks, CNN and MSNBC. So the spin was built in. Now you saw during the campaign, Trump doing podcasts all over the place. His surrogates, his cabinet members, they're on podcasts. They go everywhere. So they're not worried about friendly media. They do NBC, they do CBS, and they strike back when the journalists try to pull bullshit.
No, I 100% agree with that. The only the only thing I want to basically reiterate, whatever you want to say, is that 6 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever, podcast didn't have the alternative media.
Right.
Didn't have the you had blockers and tacklers for the Democrats, that is corporate media. Now they're still, even if they do the same, they don't have the impact. They have an impact? Yes, but not what it used to be. So I think information does go through. One of the reasons Trump won the election, because if it was up to corporate media, he would have lost.
Well, and again, part of what made podcasts get so much more power than they had was, one, the acknowledgement from the Trump campaign that this was a viable medium and it was important. but also because it was podcasters for years, and credit where credit is due, Fox News, Newsmax, and OAN, that was reporting on Biden's infirmities all along. The moment that Joe Biden did the debate, America suddenly realized, wait a minute, we have been being lied to. And not just by the
100%.
administration, people expect to be lied to by the administration. The impact was that they were lied to by the media, who is supposed to be the fourth estate, the guardians of truth.
Okay, then you know that ship has left the station
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
30 years ago. Okay, no, I know
Yes,
there was no going to be no
but now it's
conflict
out.
there.
But now it's out there. Now
And
people
you're 100%. Your
understand what's
analysis,
going on.
your analysis is 100%. It's like being in a relationship and they say they're going to the baseball practice every day, but they're hooking up with someone else. You've been lied to, and I believe just like in personal lives, in business, like for instance in sales, once you lie, you can never get it back. It's the truth. Or
It
it's very
is.
difficult to get it
It
back.
it
You have to
is,
hide
and
with the best car ever, and it's not, you have a problem.
it is very difficult to recover once you're caught in a lie. And what's making it worse is all of the people who are saying, "Oh, well, no, we didn't lie. We didn't mean that. What you took it wrong. We didn't say that." Jake Tapper is now coming out with a damning book about the Biden
The worst of them
administration.
all, the most
And
damning of all.
and
Yes,
yet, if you take a look on YouTube, you can see the clips where he's accusing um other more right-wing
Laura Trump.
pundits.
Laura Trump.
Yes, Laura Trump was one of them, saying, "How dare you say he's mentally infirm? You're not qualified." It's like they were saying, don't believe your eyes, believe what we're telling you. And that just doesn't fly, because now it's all come out. And it started as a joke where people were saying this cover up is worse than Watergate. Guess what? It's not a joke anymore. This was a bigger cover up than Watergate.
Agreed, but I also want your opinion. I'm sure our listeners do as well. You can think again, conspiracy theories. It started out as a joke. It's not a joke anymore. With that auto pen, who really signed all this shit? I mean,
No,
that's not a bullshit question. That's a real
no, it's
question,
not.
Lopkin.
It's a real question, and it needs to be answered. And there needs to be a
Yes,
congressional inquiry into whether or not Joe Biden actually knew what was going on. To take a line back from the Iran Contra, we need to know what he knew and when he knew it. If he was not aware of the laws that were being signed in, the bills he was signing into law, then quite frankly, like the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, all these things that they touted, if he wasn't aware he was signing them, or if somebody else signed them, there's a good possibility that they could all be thrown out as illegal.
I think it's a bigger issue with the pardons. I believe because there's these rose garden ceremonies with him with the inflation. That's lesser of an
Well,
issue.
I'm
There's
using
ancillary.
I'm using those bills as an example because everybody
No,
knows
no,
their names.
no,
Yeah.
100%. I got it, 100%. I think what's more salient is all those pardons, maybe less known bills. You don't need an auto. You need an auto pen when you're in an autograph show and you're whipping out autographs for 5,000 people. You don't need an auto signer for legislation or pardons. It makes no sense. I think there was a real problem, and I believe you were 1,000% correct, 1,000,000,000% correct. It makes Watergate look like a joke. It was the biggest scandal, and it's another reason why the Democrats are really struggling. This whole bullshit, and that's what it is, about democracy. Democracy, you had someone that wasn't even alive as president. You could have blown up the world. And that's not hyperbole. That's the truth. And, you really look at what the situation is, it's downright scary. There were even talk in his in Tapper's book that he was so frail they thought his spine was going to give out and they'd have to put him in a wheelchair, but they were waiting till after the election. Does that look like democracy to you, Dr. Lopkin?
No, you're hiding from the American people the fact that the commander in chief is incapable of doing his job. I mean, quite frankly, during the Trump administration, the Democrats kept yelling, "Well, Trump is not capable of this. We're going to have to invoke the 25th Amendment." Uh, that credibility is gone. The Democrats can no longer claim any 25th Amendment, impeachments. It's like, no, all of this should have been done during the Biden administration, and they covered it up.
Yes, and again, we talked about this years ago. The Democrats, I'm sorry, I mean, both parties want power, but
Yes.
there is a line, a Rubicon to cross, and that the Democrats have no problem crossing it. They will jeopardize America's future, both economically, militarily, and from security perspective, for their own empowerment and betterment. You look at the war in Ukraine. I mean, you no sense boring everyone with a whole list, but these things were getting more dangerous and could have gotten to the point of no return. It is unconscionable, and if the Republicans have any kind of ho-hos, they would get their ass in gear and start looking at this.
Well, I
Ron
think
Klain, others need to testify.
Yeah, I think, and I have not gotten confirmation on this. I've just heard some, some basic rumors that there are a number of people in the congressional committees who are planning on opening investigations, but not until after they get the big, beautiful bill passed. They want to focus on the tax cuts and focus on rebuilding the economy from what Biden left. And then they are actually going to start investigations, which I agree with. I'm glad they're putting the American people first before what could be considered political investigations.
Okay, you bring up I agree with you, by the way, 100%. Okay, and it's not really belaboring a point. It's very interesting to me, and I think for most of our listeners. And if this bill passes, the stock market's going to go up 1,000 points that day. Okay, and it's going to have a huge run. The any recessionary talks or possibilities minimized greatly, if not eliminated. My question to you, and I'm sure our listeners would like to know your insight: what the hell do the Democrats stand on the midterms? I know there could be a comet that crashes into America. You never know what's going to happen. But overall, what the hell do they got going for them? I mean, you look at even Mr. Hogg, the weightlifter. He lifts toothpicks, by the way. He's been replaced. I mean, you have a party in disarray, getting arrested for body slamming ICE agents. I mean, there's just no. And then also like Chuck Schumer and others, Joaquin Jeffries. Um, it gets me like cry wolf. It's just, what are you bitching about? There's nothing to bitch about. Your thoughts are, but what do they really have to stand? If these things go through, if an Abraham Accord, if when these jobs are coming from the Middle East and other places around the world, I don't know what you can talk about. And I know it's partisan, but it's really not. You're the marketing guru. I don't understand what you can talk about.
No, they have a problem right now in that they don't have issues to stand on, which is their own doing. I mean, quite frankly, the Democrats, having seen the results of the election, really should have gotten behind Doge and put their own spin on it. They could have said, look, we are going to get rid of the waste. We are going to outdo Elon Musk, and we are going to uncover waste and fraud and get rid of it. And instead, they fought it tooth and nail. They could have said, we are going to make sure that our cities are safe and that the illegal immigrants that are are committing crimes are the first to be deported, but instead they fought against it. You know, they're
But can they
digging
help
themselves.
themselves? You see, you're assuming that they're rational. I contend, and it is not hyperbole. I really do believe that they're not a rational party anymore. I'm really not kidding with you. There's
I
some you always
honestly
talk about well, go
I
ahead.
honestly
They're not
have to
rational.
yeah, I honestly have to agree with you at this point, because the only rationale that they've given is their base says they want them to do everything they can to stop Donald Trump. Well, first of all, take a look at their base. Their base is the far left now because
They're
everybody
insane.
else shifted over to Trump this election. And again, every district in the United States shifted red. Even those that Kamala Harris won, she won by less than Biden did. So every district shifted to the red. You would think that the Democrats would take that as an indication that they need to capture the center. Instead, they're focused on placating their shrinking base, which is going to alienate the centrist independents that either party needs to win an election.
I would agree. Before we move off this real quick, you're 100% correct. I do think it's like I don't know, too over dramatic, whatever. But I think it's like kind of like a drug addict around. They can't help themselves. They can't. It's irrational thought. You're mad at the guy that's making passes at your wife. He's really not, but you're so incensed you can't help yourself. So I think they're in that stance, and the more they continue on this path, protesting nothing that's not even nothing to protest. I think it's just going to get worse. And if you look at the economic, remember Carvel, it's the economy, stupid. You look at, and for the prep before the show, you brought that out, or you brought this up in the discussion, that you look at the numbers, and I'll let you talk to this, the third quarter numbers of 2024 that everyone was touting of Bidenomics and almost 400,000 in new jobs. What was the reality of that,
Yeah.
doctor?
Before I give the numbers, we need to provide a little background on where these numbers come from. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is the government agency that puts out the job numbers every month. They put out these job numbers and they generally put out revisions to their estimates from the prior 2 months. This data comes from a survey. They've got about 600,000 businesses that they survey about 200,000 of them for each of these reports. They also put out a quarterly report that takes a little longer to put out. And this is done with a survey of 12 million businesses. So the data in this survey is a lot more accurate. Well, but it also takes longer to put together. The data from third quarter 2024 just came out this past week. And the data shows that as opposed to the 399,000 jobs that the earlier report said were created during the third quarter, in actuality, America lost 1,000 private sector jobs. So that is a shift of 400,000 jobs that didn't exist, that the Democrats were claiming this is how you know Bidenomics is working.
One little, maybe minor point. I don't think it is so minor. When you do the post analysis, a lot of Bidenomic jobs were not in the private sector; they were in the governmental sector. Those are not the same.
Yes, that's true. A lot of the jobs were created because they were hiring government workers, and yet there were tons of government jobs that went unfilled. Case in point, air traffic controllers. The Biden administration had hundreds, if not thousands, of open positions for air traffic controllers that they did not fill because they could not find qualified people that met their DEI criteria.
Correct. Another dagger in the Democratic carcass, I have to say. I think people have had enough of DEI and all that other crap and wokeness. But still, it is the economy. And remember when Trump first took office, he had nothing to do with it, but egg prices because of the bird flu were skyrocketing. It had nothing to do with Trump, but of course, Chucky and the other cast of characters, lambasted him for it. But now, and they were so concerned all of a sudden with inflation, even though Uncle Joe, basically the only rival he can even come close to is Jimmy Carter. Inflation now is around 2%, the lowest it's been since shithead took office. That is Biden.
Yes, the new inflation numbers came out. They went up, I believe it was 2.3%. It's slightly higher than what the Fed is looking for, but it is the lowest it is the lowest rate since February 2021. So, and remember, at one point during the Biden administration, we had hit 9.7% inflation.
Yes,
So
it was.
now we're now
And
we're
did you
down
ever
to.
hear? Wait, did you ever hear the Democrats during that time? Were they really, or the corporate media? I didn't hear a lot of pushback on that. I
No,
didn't. I really didn't.
no, they kept first they said, "Oh, this is transitory." Then
Transitory, yeah.
then they said, "Oh, it's just a little growing pains, it's fine." And then finally they said, "Well, no, the economy is doing great. You're just not seeing it."
Again, being lied to is one of the worst affronts you can do to a person or a population as a whole. But you also bring up a very good point in terms of who's in charge. You have Bassett, right? I believe he's brilliant. And then you juxtapose him to Janet Yellen. Oh my God.
Oh, Besant,
Okay.
yes. Yeah,
That's
yeah, and that
unbelievable.
and that
Compared to
was
Janet Yellen. You
and that
kidding
was
me?
something else that made a major difference in the Trump administration. Trump went after qualified people regardless of where they were at the time. He pulled several people that were working at Fox News because prior to being at Fox News, they had amazing careers in government service and doing exactly what these jobs required. The latest case in point is he just pulled Judge Jeanine Pirro off the air from Fox to serve as Attorney General in Washington, D.C., where Biden,
Correct.
if Biden actually had any say in who his cabinet and his appointees were, he pulled from the usual suspects. He pulled from the folks who did political favors. Nobody
Or
in the Biden
DEI.
administration was chosen because of qualifications.
None.
But it is very interesting. We talked about the chairperson, Hogg, being is just in the process of being extricated, and it's really hysterical. I don't think it's going to help them at all. Obviously, it shows a lack of consistency, but also the reason why he's being eliminated because of they didn't have enough. They have to have all these. It's an insane party. I bring it. They're not stable at this point because he's too white and not diverse enough. These people are insane.
Yeah,
So that's
well,
the reason. Now, the real reason is because he's an idiot. I got
yeah.
that with no
Well,
real experience.
the more than not having experience, part of the problem that the Democratic Party is having with Hogg is that he is actively primarying Democratic candidates. Now,
Probably not a good idea.
both parties are supposed, now they don't always do this, especially here in Connecticut. It's actually the opposite. But both parties are supposed to stay out of the primaries. The primaries are supposed to be anybody who wants to run in a primary can, and the winner it gets the party support. Hogg is throwing support behind specific candidates, which again, you're supposed to leave it up to the voters, which again the Democrats take a look at the
Democrats have a problem
presidential
doing that.
primary. They,
Yeah, I
they
think that's a
rigged their
real issue.
presidential primary. So this is a major issue for them. The the hat that they're hanging getting rid of him on is hysterical because basically they're saying the DNC's vote discriminated against candidates who were women of color.
It just it's actually unbelievable. It's funny, but unbelievable. But I think it's also indicative of a wholesale panic. You look at Rasmussen did a survey, and they're very accurate, even though they're right leaning. And 49% say they're on the America's on the right track. That is a 40-year high.
Yes.
You can't. And why do I bring that up? Because you could say all the shit you want. He's a Nazi and blah blah racist. But if people are feeling this, people are feeling, and I think it's going to go up. I think this was done when the tariffs were still a real open-ended question before the trip to the Middle East. I mean, probably 53%. I mean, there's nothing there. What are you going to bitch about? Things are too good. We're getting spoiled. I mean, what do you do?
Right. Going back to it's the economy, stupid. We saw inflation. Yes, it's still going up, but at its slowest rate in since the first Trump administration. We saw they were hanging their hats on the stock market volatility. Well, this week the S&P 500 erased all of the losses since January 1st. It is now higher than it was during the Biden administration. So and if you pay attention, they'll pick a topic. Doesn't matter what that topic is, and they'll go all in for about a week and a half or so on that topic, bitching and moaning and yelling, and then it'll turn out that they were completely wrong. They don't have a leg to stand on, and all of a sudden they'll move on to the next topic.
That's called desperation, my friend.
Yes.
And I think it's increasingly not working. And also, what's not working is the Democratic bench of so called superstars. Yeah, Bernie, I'm sorry to say, couldn't happen to a nicer piece of shit. But I think that train's left the station. 1%, 1%. Yeah, okay, you get rid of one of your homes. Okay, so he takes private jets along with the other communist AOC, and he's bitching and moaning all the time about we're 3 years away from extinction. Meanwhile, his private travel is equal to like I don't know 100 houses for a whole year, and he's beneath. So do as I say, not as I do. He's not going to sit at the United Terminal. That's for the schleps like you and I, and like our listening
Right.
audience. He needs private first class. What are you, crazy? Yeah, you other shitheads can go in stowage. But Bernie and AOC, who never worked a day in their lives before getting into politics, need to go first class, of course. What are you, crazy? What are you, nuts?
Yeah. Yeah, they're flying private jets all over the country. And his response to being questioned about this is, well, Trump always flew in a private jet. It's like, yes, but Trump wasn't claiming it was a problem. Trump wasn't going after the millionaires and the billionaires. So,
and also,
again,
another little point. Another little point. It was Trump's frigging plane.
Right.
Duh. Yes. Yeah, just a little minor point. Okay, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
But on top of that, again, we discussed this before the podcast. He is one of the largest recipients of donor money from big pharma. So
RFK called that out, by the way.
Yes, RFK called that out. Reporters are now hitting him with his private air travel. Yeah, he does not have a leg to stand on. He's getting
none.
He's getting crowds at these events because they're being held in conjunction with free concerts.
Neil Young.
Well, there's other concerts going on as well, but there's always something else to draw people in. And they have done studies of the cell phone traffic at these events and found the same cell phones at each event. So this is a group of paid people that are going to these events. Now, I think Bernie knows he's not going anywhere. His
Goodbye.
position in the Senate is he's there until he either retires or dies. I think he is trying to set up AOC as his
Yes,
successor, and I believe she will try to run for president in
no question.
2028. And quite frankly, I want to see that so bad because she will get devastated if she manages to get past the primaries, which there is a good possibility. Because if you take a look at the primaries for both parties, the Republican primary candidates swing to the right. The Democratic primary candidates swing to the left. And then once they win the primary, they try to move to the center to get the centrist independents. There is no way for AOC to move to the center.
Let me just
AOC,
interject one thing on that. One thing though, I think historically, it's true somewhat for the well, both parties are becoming more polarized. Here's where I disagree with you on. I don't think the Democrats can and have any inclination of moving to the center. They are firmly entrenched in the left. I do agree with you 100% that not only would AOC lose, but it would be one of those one and dones a la like 1972 with McGovern, never to be seen again. In fact, if I was going to advise her, which I wouldn't because I despise her, I would probably tell her to do the podcast, do the TikToks, and just keep a good thing going.
that would be her best bet. I think she will run for president in 2028. I think she will get absolutely devastated. She will be
Destroyed.
crushed. And I'm not even sure she'll get crushed in a general. I think she might get crushed in a primary. But
Here's where I
I
disagree with you.
think,
No, because you're talking about the current day Democratic Party. I think she fits them perfectly.
yeah, but there's
Perfectly.
there's other left-wing candidates that have
Perfectly.
already said they're going to run also. So
Okay.
there has been quite a number of times where AOC has been criticized for not being far left enough. These are usually votes where she will vote present because she doesn't want to get lambasted by her constituents, where she did not condemn Israel for defending themselves, where she did not vote against Israel getting weapons. So she's going to have to defend herself on both fronts. And that may be her undoing in a primary. It depends on who else enters. But I think what's going to happen is she is going to be demolished. And then in 2029, after losing the presidential, I believe she'll be out of office at that point because she won't be able to hold on to her congressional seat while she runs for president. She will attempt to primary Chuck Schumer or Chuck Schumer's handpicked successor at that point if he decides to step down. And I think all of the baggage that beat the hell out of her in the presidential election will be used against her in New York State.
A very likely possibility. I'll throw one other possibility. I think because she never really gives a shit, just like Harris. They don't want to do any work. It's all about showbiz. And maybe she might get replace Colbert. Seriously, I'm dead serious. Yeah, get a talk show or a Jimmy Kimmel, whatever. No one watches them anyway. Who gives a shit? So yeah, it'll be
Well,
interesting. And another rising
actually,
star.
actually,
Good.
if you want to go off on a tangent, media rumors right now are that Jimmy Kimmel is not going to be renewed at ABC, and there are
Oh
talks
shucks.
And there are talks that not only is Colbert going to be let go by CBS, they may get out of late night altogether.
Well, they should pull that plug. Okay, wait. We both love Johnny Carson. I didn't love Jay Leno. You look at Jay Leno on a YouTube, like a best of, or no, we're not best of, the headline. He's actually funny. These guys suck. I mean, suck. I mean,
well,
Colbert is just an entitled elitist, just a mouthpiece. It's not even funny. I heard a great analysis. No one laughs. They just applaud. He's a political hack.
yes,
no laughter, just applause.
That's all that's left there. I think I saw a clip that really showcases the difference in what late night used to be and what it is now. David Letterman had put together a series of clips of Johnny Carson. This was done as a tribute when he passed away. And this was not Johnny on The Tonight Show, but it was Johnny coming on Late Night with David Letterman. And all Johnny had to do was walk onto stage, and the crowd went crazy. Now, if any of these guys walks onto a stage, who cares?
Oh, it would be like, okay, yeah, whatever. Yeah, no big deal. But let's conclude with another rising star, and I'd like your opinion. So would our listeners. Gavin Newsom, he's trying to reposition himself, remarket himself, going has his own podcast, trying to moderate. Shucks, he's $12 billion in debt. Could be a problem. Could be.
Yeah.
And the way he handled the fires, I'm not so sure he's any kind of rising star. But what is your thoughts?
Yeah, Newsom is kidding himself. Quite frankly, I think he's actually doing the right thing and trying to move to the center now, but it's not going to fool anybody. You're going to see, when he declares that he's running for president, you're going to see commercials featuring footage of what happened to California during the wildfires.
100%.
You're also
and
going
about the
to
smelt and about how we saved the smelt, and meanwhile the entire state is burning. Yes, 100%.
You're also going to be reminded ad infinitum of which people should be reminded that California had a massive deficit going into COVID. And during COVID, the Biden administration used COVID relief funds to bail out the state of California. So the fact that they were no longer in debt. And here we are, 4 years after getting those payments, they are now again $12 billion in debt.
I think he has no chance at the presidential.
Right. No how way. Does he think he can win a presidential how does he never mind win the election? How does he think he can run the country when he couldn't even run the state?
Because it's a democratic disease. It's low on talent, high on aspirations. You have Biden, Harris. I mean, these people would be maybe like, I don't know, like a librarian somewhere or something. And to have the hubris to think you're presidential, it boggles the mind. You could go any day, go to a coffee house, and you could get 10 more qualified people than those clowns.
You're right. And, we talked earlier on earlier podcasts about the fact that if the Democrats were going to be saved, it was going to be from probably one of the governors that, didn't have such a high profile, and someone that's, out of the Washington bubble, the same way Bill Clinton saved the Democratic Party in 92. Well, we've got a number of governors coming forward, and so far they're not in any position to save the Democratic Party. You have J.B. Pritzker, who destroyed the state of Illinois. He's running for president. It's ridiculous how
the
all
clown
of these...
show. You're going to have Elizabeth Warren too. I know she's not a governor, but
she always runs and she never
perpetually.
She never gets past Super Tuesday. She'll fail early
There you go.
again.
Oh well. Well,
So,
we are not failing. Go ahead.
before we sign off, I think there is one story we need to cover on a much lighter note, fortunately, but we didn't talk about this in the prep, and because I just remembered about it. But there has been a major shift at Major League Baseball. The commissioner has removed Pete Rose and Shoeless
Yes.
Joe Jackson, as well as 18 other ball players who had lifetime bans in baseball. They are now eligible to be put into the Baseball Hall of Fame, saying, and I loved this quote, that once somebody passes away, there's nothing they can do to be a danger to baseball. We can forgive them for their actions.
Well said. Awesome. I think Rose should have had that happen a long time ago.
Yes.
Excellent show, Dr. Lopkin, and our listeners can contribute to the process, can't they?
Yes, let's hear what you have to say. Go to the Carnivore Radio Facebook page or xvadio.com/connect. Let us know what you think. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites at the Carnivore Radio website, xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. See you next time.
We'll see you then.